Hello, welcome to a video lecture that I prepared for you on the proposal assignment, our final major assignment of the semester. Wanted to talk to you about what is a proposal and some other particulars about proposals. I've got a couple of PowerPoint slide presentations, and then I've got some documents that I've posted on D2L that I wanted to talk to you about. And also, wanted to talk about some student examples and an example that I have from my own writing. Not a very good example, but I'll share it with you. And the student examples, my example, that might have to wait for another lecture depending on how long this one goes. So let me get started and talk about a few things to kind of introduce you to the project. So first of all, let me show you the assignment sheet for this. Okay, so here's the assignment sheet, and it's got a lot. It's pretty wordy, and I'm going to try to unpack some of this for you. So, just reading a little bit of it to you, that proposals are detailed documents that are written to address a specific need and offer to provide a product or service or carry out research to address the specific need that has been identified. So I know that's maybe not a very helpful definition at this point, but as we talk our way through it, I think you'll come to understand this a little better. And so I talk about a few things down here that I'm going to talk about in my lecture, my slides, and this assignment, it's another formal document. It's going to have a cover and a table of contents and sections and pagination throughout, and a letter of transmittal to get it from your hands into the recipient's hands. And kind of like the document standards manual, when you see 8 to 10 pages, you think, oh my gosh, this is going to be a daunting task. And it's a little bit daunting, but I also think that when we start to look at the different parts of a proposal, that it's almost impossible to do it in 8 to 10 in less than 8 to 10 pages. And also I wanted to encourage you, kind of like I encouraged you on the document standards manual, to go ahead and set up a table of contents, and then from that table of contents to set up, page breaks for these different sections. And much like with the document standards manual, this will enable you to kind of jump around and work on different sections at different times instead of feeling like you have to, start at the beginning and plow your way through until you get to the end. So I think that makes it a bit easier to kind of break it up into chunks and to feel like you can work around in those chunks. So down here at the end, I talk about what is a full formal proposal. So it's going to have a letter of transmittal, a table of contents, a summary of the proposal. One of the things that we typically do toward the end, we typically start with the body of the document and work our way kind of forward, and then come back, and the letter of transmittal, table of contents, the summary or abstract. That's kind of front matter for this particular document. So when we get into the body, we have an introduction that provides a background and identifies the need. And then we have a proposed program. The introduction is going to be 2 to 3 pages. The proposed program is going to be 2 to 3 pages. So already we're up to 6 pages. Qualifications and experience. It's typically less than a page. And so how are you qualified to undertake this project? And sometimes it's tempting to put your resume in there, but instead, in the qualifications and experience section, you're supposed to talk about your qualifications and experience in paragraph form, but you can make reference to your resume and then include that in the appendices, the back matter for this document. So, okay. And talking about accompanied by illustrations, figures, charts, etc. And we'll talk about that as we work through the process. So, so I've got something here about finding a topic. I'm going to let you kind of read that on your own. Basically, what you're going to do is maybe take a personal inventory and what do you have to offer in terms of goods, services, or research. So you're already a student, a college student at West Chester University, so you can offer research right away, depending on what your topic is. You could also probably provide services of some sort, maybe thinking along the lines of your major, and also maybe thinking about your personal hobbies and interests. So, and I think that's about it on this point. And so let me go back to my slides. Okay, so the first bullet item I have here is kind of doesn't answer the question. Instead of what is a proposal, I'm telling you what it's not. It's not what you might find in the first or second year composition classroom, a typical assignment called proposing solutions. So notice that proposing solutions is plural solutions. So we're just proposing one solution, and you have to provide what we call the deliverables on that. So let me talk about the proposing solutions essay. I oftentimes ask my students to write one of these. And so what that usually entails is identifying some problem and then exploring various possible solutions and why they're not the best solution, and then identifying what you think is the best solution and then defending it against counter arguments. So one of the major differences between the proposal and the proposing solutions essay is I find that almost always when students write a proposing solutions essay, it involves someone else doing the work. So, and that's fine. But what we're doing with the proposal is you are going to be doing the work that you propose. So, so I oftentimes embrace the issue of parking at West Chester University. Many students feel like this is a problem. And so proposing solutions, we might say the university needs to build a parking garage right in the middle of campus or something. So, but we don't own a construction company, and so we can't propose to build this parking garage. And so someone else has to do it. And what we're trying to do with the proposal is deliver something. So, and with the issue of parking at West Chester, one thing that you can deliver is you could deliver research. So you could say, I'm drafting a proposal for research into what can be done about the parking situation at West Chester University. And so you're not actually proposing to build a parking garage, but you could, in terms of research, you could say, let's look at all these different options. Let's build a parking garage, let's build some more surface lots, let's require people to carpool to West Chester, let's have some off-site parking, maybe down on South Campus, and we have to shuttle things around. And so what we would do is we wouldn't actually propose the solution, but we would propose a feasibility study, and then you would carry out that feasibility study, and then the outcome of that, once you're awarded the contract, the feasibility study would make a recommendation, but we're not going that far. That's kind of step 3, and we want to just do steps 1 and 2, propose that we're going to investigate the issue and draft a report that will make a recommendation. And we're not going to get into the recommended solution yet. So this is, I know, a bit confusing, but if we look down a little bit on this slide where it talks about deliverables, goods, services, and research. Research is one of the types of deliverables that you could provide. So let me back up a little bit. And so my second bullet item there, typically involves, or almost always involves, a give and take. So you're doing something, you're proposing to do something in exchange for something. So typically you're providing goods, services, or research in exchange for being paid. So that's part of the give and take. And so I have this phrase here, quid pro quo. We oftentimes hear that statement. Sometimes we hear it in a negative connotation, such as, sexual harassment in the workplace, that it was a case of quid pro quo that, in exchange for this, that you got a raise or a promotion or something. And so there's this thing that makes it a bad thing in terms of this for that, which is what quid pro quo translates from Latin. So, so this phrase oftentimes has a negative connotation in the workplace, but it's also a good way of thinking about this proposal, that you're offering to do something. I'm going to give you this work, research, services, goods, and in exchange you're going to give me something back. So typically cash, money, something you get paid for, but not necessarily. You could also use this proposal to propose an internship. So you're proposing to work for someone during the semester in exchange for credit here at Westchester University. So so there's always this kind of give and take with the type of proposal that we're dealing with. Okay, so what can you deliver? We have these deliverables. So goods could be things like, staples or copy paper or pencils, markers for the classroom or something. Those are goods, and most of us aren't in a position to provide goods at this stage in our lives. So you could maybe think about owning a company. You could kind of write this into the future. Maybe you will be some type of office supply company in the future, and you're going to propose to Westchester that you provide them with all of their office supplies. But so oftentimes with this proposal assignment, students kind of shy away from the goods as deliverables and instead focus on services or research. So we already talked about research and that you're a student, and then services, that something like an internship. You're working for someone in exchange for college credit. Other types of services. So the proposal process, many people actually make a living off of this. Instead of a regular full-time job, they propose to help people with different things, kind of on a limited contract, and then they get paid for it, and then they turn around and propose to someone else, and they kind of keep this going. So proposal process is a way to maybe employ yourself when you don't have a company that you're working for. So, okay. So, types of proposals, they break down in a couple of different ways, internal and external. So, internal would be within an organization. So, maybe you're working for a company and you see something that you think could be done differently or something, and so typically you'd go to your supervisor and suggest that they do things differently, but there might be a situation where your supervisor will say, good idea, write it up in the form of a proposal and I will carry it to the higher ups and see what they think about it. So that would be an internal proposal. External So the money is coming from somewhere else. So, uh, and we're going outside the organization. So, external proposals are used increasingly in different professions as a way to kind of make up maybe some shortfall in funding or something that they might say, we're going to propose that maybe at Westchester University I can't afford to buy computers for all of my students, but I could go to someone like Apple or Microsoft and say, not just please give us money for computers or please give us computers, but I would try to align my goals and objectives, having these computers for students, with their goals and objectives. Maybe they're supporting computer literacy or higher education or underserved populations, um, getting them access to computer technology and the internet or something. So we oftentimes have to negotiate this rhetorically in terms of what you want and whoever is funding this proposal, what they want to do with their money. So we kind of have a happy medium there. So that's difference between internal and external, and then solicited and unsolicited. So solicited proposals, they've asked for proposals. So they've if issued something, a request for proposals about something, and you've responded to that. Unsolicited is kind of like a cold call. So, um, you know, this proposal shows up on their doorstep and they didn't advertise for it, but maybe you want something from them like computers, or maybe you're proposing to do something for them in exchange for something else. And in that regard, we could also look at the employment packet, the job application materials, the letter of application, and the resume as a type of proposal. So we are proposing that they hire us in exchange, so we're gonna come to work for their company, and in exchange, they're gonna pay us. Um, so in many ways, like I said, the employment packet is a kind of proposal, and frequently we would call that a solicited proposal because you're probably responding to a job ad. So, but sometimes there are unsolicited employment packets that you send something to a company. You say, I know you're not currently advertising for employment, but I really want to work for your company, and please keep my materials on hand for 6 months or so in case an opening develops. So we could, with the employment packet, have both solicited and unsolicited proposals. So last item I have on this slide is that they're found in every field, including academia. So what I'm trying to say, a couple of things here, is that because oftentimes operational funds are short, that organizations try to look for these requests for proposals, or they create an unsolicited proposal in order to help them do something. So, okay, and when I'm talking about academia, what's going through my mind is thinking about, like, when I go to a conference, the conference will issue what's called a call for papers, which is kind of like a request for proposals. And so I send them a proposal to do a conference presentation, and they accept it or reject it. And if they accept it, then I write the paper, and then I go and present it. Also in academia, you may be familiar, you may have heard about people talking about grants. A grant is where some other entity, could be a government agency, could be a private foundation, could be a corporate foundation, that you wrote a proposal to them, and so it is a grant proposal, and they've considered it, and then they're going to fund maybe your research in, who knows, whatever your field is. So, okay, and in terms of grant proposals, every now and then you hear people, I think frequently actually, you'll hear people talking about grant writing. We're actually creating a course at Westchester on grant writing. It's my opinion that that's a misnomer. It shouldn't be grant writing, it should be grant proposal writing, because the people who cut the check to you, they're actually doing the grant. That's what the check is. It's a grant. But to propose that they cut you that check is grant proposal writing. But people somehow shorten it to just grant writing, and so that's a bit confusing. Okay, moving along. Okay, so a little bit more about solicited proposals. I mentioned that it typically involves a request for proposals, an RFP. Who issues an RFP? Just about every publicly funded entity issues RFPs, because we're dealing with public funds, and so we want to spend them in the most responsible way possible. And so I mentioned office supplies earlier, that on an annual basis, Westchester University will issue an RFP for office supplies. And I think currently Office Max is the provider of those office supplies. I oftentimes see the trucks on campus, and they got the kind of the rubber band ball on the outside, on the side of the truck. And so they have the contract for the current academic year to provide, staples, copy paper, other office supplies to the institution. And so someone like Westchester University, they would, as a university, would issue this RFP, rather than maybe each individual department or college doing their own thing. It works better if they kind of coordinate and centralize this. So, so they issue this RFP, and then different suppliers will respond to the RFP with a proposal, or what's sometimes called a bid. And oftentimes these are sealed bids. They send them in to the budget office here on campus. And then there's a public meeting that's held, because we want to make this as transparent as possible. And the bids are unsealed during that public meeting. And typically the contract goes to the low bidder, because that's responsible, use of public funds. Is whoever comes in cheapest and is going to do the job, we're going to give them the contract. So there has to be some type of a case made to go beyond the low bid. So, and this process is referred to as competitive bidding. So, so that's one type of an RFP. I also have down here government agencies. So, for example, National Endowment for the Arts, National Endowment for the Humanities. Each year, Congress gives them their appropriation for the year, and they've got this money that they can give away. And so, so what they could do is just say, come one, come all, and we'll split this money up evenly. But what happens in that process is, everyone gets shortchanged, that you get $50 instead of $50,000. So, so through this proposal process, people submit their projects, and there's a group, kind of a board, a committee, that will review all of the proposals. And they kind of go through a couple of different rounds of review, where they say, nah, we're not doing that one, not doing. So they break them into two different piles: toss and keep, toss and keep. And then they go through the ones that they decided to keep, and then they'll winnow those down a bit more and a bit more, until they finally decide on which projects they're going to fund for the year. So, so rather than just getting shortchanged and not being able to do much with a grant from one of these agencies, they'll fund you more fully to do your project. So I also have foundations down here. So we hear things like Pew Charitable Trust, the Bill and Melanie Gates Foundation, the owners of Target stores. It's the Dayton Hudson Corporation. So they're a corporate foundation. The Bill and Melanie Gates Foundation is a private foundation. And so these different foundations are set up to collect money and then redistribute it. And with both corporate foundations and private foundations, you may ask yourself, why are they in the business of giving away all this money? Why don't they just hang on to it? Well, two things. One is they're trying to do good. So corporate foundation like Dayton Hudson Foundation, Target stores, they typically give, I think, 5% or 6% of their profits away every year, and typically toward inner city projects in cities and towns where they have stores. Private foundation, Bill and Melanie Gates, they're giving away this money as well. And I think one of their main objectives is to eradicate malaria worldwide. So that's one reason they want to do good. But is that the only reason? Of course not. So another reason is by giving away money, it lowers their tax burden. It becomes a tax write-off. So instead of having to give so much money to the IRS at the end of the year, they can keep more money if they give away some of the money that they've made throughout the year. So that's kind of a quick rundown on proposals. I actually have another PowerPoint presentation that I want to share with you. So let me go to that. Okay, so this is from an earlier version of our text, but basically it's much of the same information. Writing a proposal requires 7 steps. First 2 steps, this is the rhetorical situation, audience and a purpose. So, and then gather information about your subject, so do some research. Choose the appropriate type of proposal, draft the proposal, format it, revise, edit, proofread, and submit. That last step is actually like 4 steps, so I don't know why they say just 7 steps. Anyway, moving along, we've already talked a little bit about this, that proposals can be internal or external, and they can be solicited or unsolicited. And actually, it should be broken down, solicited and unsolicited, not only under external, but also under internal. Proposals are submitted in response to a request for proposals or an IFB, information for bid. So those are solicited proposals. And then unsolicited proposals submitted by a supplier who believes that the prospective customer has a need for goods and services. So in many ways, when you check your mail and there's this flyer in there for pest control services or for re-roofing your house or something like that, you didn't ask for it, but it showed up on your doorstep. And even though it's just kind of a, maybe cardstock, or maybe even a small brochure, it's not as developed as the proposals that we're doing, but it's still kind of a proposal. And even an advertisement can be seen as a type of proposal. And in fact, in terms of this for that, quid pro quo, a marriage proposal is a type of proposal that we're doing. You're offering to give your undying love and affection to someone else for the rest of your life in exchange for them doing the same to you. So there's still this give and take going on. Okay, moving along. I don't know why they've broken it down this way. It seems to me that goods should be by itself because this is hard deliverables, whereas research and services are more soft deliverables, but they've decided to break it down this way, goods and services together, and then research separately. Okay. Successful proposal is a persuasive argument. This is a rhetorical document, especially the first part of the document, the introduction, where we kind of identify that there's a problem and that you have the solution to it. that is clearly a persuasive part of the document, but also the proposed program, where you lay out the program in as much detail as possible. This is kind of, you might think of it as the contract language of the proposal. This is the nitty-gritty. This is exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, how you're going to do it, in exchange for all the money that they're going to give you. So this is oftentimes a place where we do use charts, tables. I'll show you how to create what's called a Gantt chart, which is kind of a progress chart, and other things that you can put into this document. We can also include, again, some pictures in the introduction or in the proposed program. And again, thinking about pictures of people, their faces, that this would be an appeal to pathos. So I think I see, in terms of the introduction, that we have more ethos and pathos going on there. And then in the proposed program, we have more logos and pathos going on there. So, okay, so you're showing that you understand your reader's needs. You've decided what you plan to do and that you're able to do it. So this is kind of the qualification, this is both the proposed program and the qualifications and experience. Show that you're a professional and that you're committed to fulfilling your promises. Again, in terms of, you know, how well this document is put together. It will convince them, which is a rhetorical process, to hire you for this project. Okay, so our text always tries to make some allowances, address the intercultural, multicultural, international audiences. So here are some things that you can do along those lines. That what makes an argument persuasive can differ from one culture to another. So you know, here in America, we're probably about, you know, more cost savings and that type of thing. Whereas in other parts of the world, what they really maybe value is tradition, and you know, so different cultural value systems. That there might be translating involved with this proposal. You'll need to allocate time for that. Keep your graphics fairly simple. Keep your sentence structure fairly simple. Follow their local conventions in terms of punctuation, spelling, and grammar and mechanics. And another thing that they don't say here, but just kind of goes along with international communication: avoid using idioms. Idioms kind of work well in one culture or language, but maybe they don't translate well into another. So, okay, moving along. Demonstrating your professionalism. This kind of deals with qualifications and experience section. Describe your credentials and work history. Provide your work schedule. This would be part of the proposed program. Describe your quality control measures. This is part of assessment, which is also part of the proposed program. It tends to come at the end. I'll talk more about assessment. And typically you would include a budget. I'm not requiring it for this assignment, but I'm starting to think that in the future I might, because where students fail in this assignment is that sometimes they're not providing the deliverables. That they're saying, you know, to fix the parking problem at Westchester, we need to build parking structure right in the middle of campus. And this "we" really becomes Westchester University and not them as the proposer. So whatever you do, you need to be able to provide the deliverables, and sometimes having a budget, make sure that you are providing the deliverables. You know, if you say we need to build a parking structure in the middle of campus, and I'll say, great, how much is this going to cost me? And they might say, well, I don't know, figure it out yourself. So, you know, part of making sure that this is the type of proposal that we want, quid pro quo, this for that, give and take, is, you know, what's it going to cost the customer? Okay. Here's an ethics slide here about common dishonest practices. First one saying that certain qualified people will participate in the project even though they will not. So if I said that some expert on Westchester University's campus was going to help with this project because they're a big name, they're recognized, and I'm kind of using that in order to get funded. But I know full well that they're on sabbatical, they're going to be out of town, they're not going to be available. I've misled someone in this proposal. Second bullet item saying the project will be finished by a certain date, even though it will not be. So there are a couple of issues with projects that we have. Calendar overruns, and we also have cost overruns. And if you know that it's going to take more time than what you proposed, and then you're engaging in dishonest practices. And the bottom one here is about the cost overruns. To say, here's my budget, they say, great, you're the low bidder, we're going to do it. And then you get to the end after a number of weeks or months on the project, and you say, you know what, we need some more money in order to finish the project. You knew that maybe you're going to have to go that route, and you misled the customer in the proposal process. So third bullet item saying that the deliverable will have certain characteristics even though it will not. Just pulling this out of the air, but let's say you're going to say that this we're going to provide made in America products, and then you deliver these made in America products, but they turn them over and look on the bottom and it says made in China or made in Taiwan or made in Mexico. And so you kind of went the cheap route in order to improve your profit margin, but it was a dishonest practice in doing so. Okay, so again, ethics, why we need to write honest proposals. There could be legal trouble if you're not honest. You could develop a bad reputation. And finally, we all should try to do the right thing at all times. Okay. Different categories of resources, personnel. So with this proposal, I think most often students propose it as they individually will be the person responsible. But from time to time, I'd say a good maybe 25% of the proposals, 1 in 4, that they have kind of a team. So they say, here are the different people who will be on this project. Or so you have to think about those resources, who's going to be involved, facilities and equipment, other considerations. So moving along. Typical proposal includes these different sections, and I actually have another handout that kind of breaks it down a little further. But we have the summary, and typically that's written, or sometimes an abstract, I'll talk about the difference between those, but that's written at the end. We have to basically create the document, the body of the document, and then we summarize it after we've written the body of the document. And then we get into the body of the document, and we have the introduction, again, 2 to 3 pages, stating that there is a problem. Oftentimes includes research, where you plug in some sources, use some parenthetical citation. That's an appeal to ethos, that you've cited someone, that you've done your homework. So include that. Probably the most likely place that you'll use sources is in your introduction, stating that there is a problem and something needs to be done about it, and that you have the solution. The proposed program, this is what they get. So typically, and again, 2 to 3 pages, typically not any sources involved here, but we'll have charts and graphs and tables and stuff. We want to appeal heavily to logos in this section. Qualifications and experience, typically less than a page, and just a paragraph, and you can make reference to your resume and put that at the end. A budget is typically included. You're not required to do that for this assignment, but as I said before, I'm starting to rethink that because I think having a budget helps to ensure that we're doing the correct type of proposal. And then appendices are, it's kind of a general category. This is back matter, things that you've decided to include in the document, but inserting them into the body of the document would kind of break up the document too much, and so you put them at the end, and so you have that option. Okay, I also have this in a handout that I've posted on D2L. The introduction is going to address these 7 questions. What is the problem or opportunity? So identify the problem. What is the purpose of the proposal? What are you going to do about the problem? What is the background of it? So kind of like memo writing. We have that background overview section. We want to make sure everyone's on the same page. So contextualize things. Your sources of information, there's your research. The scope of the proposal sometimes throws people, but scope involves, how much time, how much money, who's going to be involved. So basically the size of the project. The organization of the proposal, you could reference the fact that you're going to have, in the following sections, I outline our proposed program, my qualifications and experience, our budget, etc. So key terms, you don't have to include that, but if there are any specialized terms, you might want to define them in the introduction. Okay, so I mentioned in the proposed program, we're going to be using tables, charts, what's called a Gantt chart, which kind of shows visually how the timeline in a visual manner. So those are typically in the body. They've got a task schedule here, not exactly what I'm looking for, but it's acceptable. So you will have to have one of these in the body of your document. And this is more of a what we call a Gantt chart. So you can see the different tasks on the left-hand side, and then across the top on the right are dates. So January 14th, January 21st, January 28th, February 4th, February 11th. And you can see how the different tasks, how much time they're going to take, and whether they overlap at different points. So I don't think any of these do overlap, but sometimes they do. It's really simple to make this type of a chart, but it's also really helpful, and so it is a requirement for the body of, for the proposed program. Okay, this is called a network diagram, and I can't even begin to explain it to you. So there's a golden rule of charts, graphs, tables, graphics that I learned when I was a journalist in a previous lifetime. And one of my editors said that these types of visuals, they need to do their magic in 3 seconds or less. If they don't, then the reader gets frustrated with them and they move on. So I can't make this out in 3 seconds, but maybe you can. So anyway, there's that. And then part of the proposed program, toward the end of your proposed program, you're going to have assessment. And there are different types of assessment. Quantitative and qualitative, you probably know the difference between those. Quantitative is numerical, and qualitative is more value, different values that get achieved. So I'm going to leave those alone, but I do want to talk about formative and summative evaluations or assessment. Formative assessment helps to shape the project along the way. So maybe you're going to promise them periodic status reports. So those update them on the project and let them know how things are going. But they're also kind of reflective, that they inform you about how well things have been going and whether you need to speed things up or what. Summative evaluation is at the end, that maybe you're going to promise them a detailed report when this project has been completed. So I'm familiar with formative and summative assessment educationally. So formative, in terms of evaluation in the classroom, we can think of quizzes as formative assessment. And so I give my students a 10-question quiz, and they do well or not so well. But based on how well they did or didn't do well, I can see what they're getting and they're not getting, and maybe I need to recover some of the material to make sure that they're getting it. So summative assessment or evaluation in the classroom would be a major exam or a paper. You know, your midterm, your final, those are more summative. So quizzes should be used to inform the instructor as well as the student about how well they're doing and what. But typically, a lot of instructors don't understand this difference, and they use quizzes as a more summative thing. They don't go back and recover the material. So, but anyway, I think you can kind of relate. Formative helps to shape and mold the project, and summative is at the end of the project. Okay, so looking in D2L, I have uploaded a number of documents here. The first one is the assignment sheet, which I showed you a little while ago. The second one, typical parts of a proposal. Let me show you what that looks like. We saw it on one of those slides, but I want to show you how I broke it down a little bit more, so hang on. Okay, so here's the handout that I've got on typical parts of a proposal, and I've broken it down into front matter, body, and back matter. And so front matter, a lot of this is going to come at the very end. But one thing is, I think it helps to create your cover or title page first. Just like with the document standards manual, it gives it a design, unifying theme, and I think it helps to provide you with a sense of accomplishment. You look at it more as a professional document and less as a school assignment like you might with a research paper or something. So figure out what your cover is going to look like and what your page design is going to be with headers and footers and such. The letter of transmittal is usually the last thing written. We've got the whole thing done. We want to get it from our hands into their hands, so we write this letter. Executive summary or abstract. I do want to make a distinction there. I think I've said summary a number of times when I should have said abstract. An abstract is a paragraph, and typically like 150 to 250 words, not very long. And it appears in the front matter. You can even put it oftentimes on the cover. So an executive summary, on the other hand, typically is about 10% of the overall document. And so I don't want you to have to worry about writing a big chunk at the end, but instead we'll create the abstract, which is, again, 150 to 200 words, something like that. Table of contents, I've got that as part of the front matter. And again, just like with the document standards manual, I would encourage you to get this set up pretty quickly after you kind of figure out your document design. And set up your table of contents with the introduction, proposed program, assessment, qualifications and experience, and any appendices. And then, like we did with the document standards manual, go insert page breaks and put these section titles at the top of each page so that you can jump around and work on them at different times. So you're going to create the table of contents, and then my inclination after that is to start writing with the introduction, to say there's a problem out there and document it, provide background, etc. And then the introduction that we're doing is kind of like an introduction to an essay. An introduction to an essay has a bunch of sentences leading down to one sentence called the thesis statement. In our introduction, we're going to have 2 to 3 paragraphs, or 2 to 3 pages. So we're having a bunch of paragraphs leading down to one paragraph, which is like a thesis, and it's called the statement of need. So proposed program, also 2 to 3 pages, includes timeline. The assessment, I think of it as part of the proposed program. Qualifications and experience, less than a page. The budget is part of the body of the document. And then at the end, appendices if necessary. So So I would start with the body, or actually the table of contents and then the body, and work my way through, and then go back and worry about some of that front matter later. Okay, I have some other documents. Let me go back to my list in D2L. Okay, the other one other document that I have is questions answered in the introduction to the proposal, and I think that's just a little PowerPoint presentation, and it's the same questions that we saw earlier. I'm going to come back to this in a another presentation, I think, where I talk about examples. But what I have here, FIPSE is the Foundation for Improvement of Post-Secondary Education. And before I came to Westchester, I was a lecturer at Arizona State University, and I worked on this project, and I wanted to talk about it. I'm actually going to show you some student examples and then show you my example here. So there's the entirety of the document here, pretty much, and then the abstract here. And then as we get to moving along with this, like in the rough draft stage, I'm going to encourage you to access this workshop document and use it to kind of review your proposal and figure out if it's in good shape. And then I also have a document here that talks about part of this assignment is a presentation of the proposal. So frequently, this written document, someone receives it, they read it, they think it's great, they contact you and they say, "We love your idea, can you come talk to our board of directors about it?" And so frequently a proposal leads to a presentation, kind of a, for lack of a better term, a dog and pony show. You're going to get up there and stand in front of, these people and give them your sales pitch, and you're going to have, for this assignment, 5 to 7 slides, basically summarizing the proposal, pretty much in the same fashion as the typical parts of a proposal. You'll have a title slide, you'll have some couple of introductory slides, you'll have 2 or 3 slides for the proposed program, you'll have your qualifications and experience slide, and then you'll say, "Any questions?" So, and I want to see, I'll talk about creating a PowerPoint presentation, and then I want to see the document, the PowerPoint, when you're done with it. So there's other documents here. I'm not going through all of them right now, but the assignment sheet is the first one there. I encourage you to download it and familiarize yourself with it. And I'm going to wrap this video lecture up for now. I think I've gone on long enough. And then I'll talk about some examples, both my example and some student examples in another presentation. Okay, that's all I've got for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.